Welcome to this week's installment of Today and Tomorrow in Scottsdale with Don Henniger. I'm Don. Joining me, as always, is my podcast hotshot, Kevin Maxwell.
Good one.
I thought you might like that one.
Yeah, I was. What's a trainee fire person called?
Hotshot, as far as I know.
Cadet.
That's right. They are called cadets.
I missed an opportunity. I'm going to save cadet for later on.
That's right.
Yeah, my hotshot cadet, Kevin Maxwell. Today, Kevin, we talk a lot in the show about community heroes, don't we?
This guy's resume is as long as my arm.
We got a community hero today, no question about that. His name is Jim Ford. He's former deputy fire chief in Scottsdale. Jim, welcome. Glad to have you on the show today.
Glad to be here today, guys.
So Jim retired from the Scottsdale Fire Department in 2021 after 47 years on the job. That's amazing.
Wait, what?
47 years. Began his career in firefighting when he was 19 years old.
I was going to say, because I was doing the math there.
Right, I know. And started full-time with Rural Metro in 1975. He joined the Scottsdale Department in 2005 as Deputy Chief Fire Marshal. Thanks to Jim. Here's one really cool thing. I think not everybody knows, but that's what we're going to talk about today, amongst other things. Jim was really the man behind Scottsdale implementing a built-in automatic sprinkler ordinance that saved who knows how many lives over all these years. And Jim, that's been a model for industry and political leaders throughout the world. I know you've been all over the place talking about how that worked, right?
Oh, I've been very lucky and very blessed with this. Lou Weissman actually started it with Frank Hodges and Bob Edwards, put the whole idea together with support from Herb Drinkwater and the council at the time. I just kind of came in a little bit later and documented everything we did and put out a report. And when I put out that report, it kind of went nationwide and then it went worldwide. So I've got to go to Sweden and Switzerland and England and all over the place. And
that's amazing.
Most fire guys don't get to do as much as I got to do.
Not so much.
I said, very blessed.
I think it's so cool that our city is sort of the birthplace, if you will, of automatic sprinkler systems in terms of putting them in as mandating them in terms of new construction and so forth. But I recall, this is going back a few years, but I recall that was not necessarily an easy fight.
No, at the time it was the longest council meeting that they'd ever had.
Is that right?
Ran a little bit over 4 hours
with
Chief Weissman and the folks he had come in and talk about it. And it was a 6-1 vote at that time.
Yeah,
there was one person, to remain nameless, that voted against it, who was in the insurance industry, but he since came back and said that was the worst vote I ever made. It was a great thing that should have happened a long time ago.
Is that right?
Yep.
What was the pushback on? Just that it would cost more money for the new builds and stuff like that?
Yeah, the cost was a big thing. Additional requirements by the local communities. People don't like to be told what to do often. And so it was all of that. It was all rolled into one. But we put together a series of offsets. They put together a series of offsets. Like the streets could be a little bit narrower and the hydrants were spaced a little further, things like that. And it ended up, the study we did after it got implemented, it ended up costing about $200 a house to sprinkle the house, and that was it.
Yeah.
And so the people that bought the homes actually paid for it. The builders didn't get hit.
So what is the ordinance then? Because I live in a really old home, so I'm not really aware of it. But is it houses built after a certain period?
It was passed in 1985, in like June of 1985. The commercial part of it, we basically went to a 0 square foot sprinkler ordinance. So everything that was built in Scottsdale after that time had to be sprinklered. Commercial, multifamily had to be sprinkled 90 days later. Residential didn't go into effect until January of 1986. And so any new developments and new homes that were designed and put in at that time had to have sprinklers protection in it.
That's pretty cool.
Do you have sprinklers in your house?
Yeah, we do. They're not automatic. They're the ones you have to install yourself.
Oh.
And so I'm not sure how that, because our house was built in, before 1985.
Oh, it was? Okay.
So the house is old enough, I guess, you obviously didn't qualify for that, but it was all the new builds from that point forward, right?
It was all the new builds, and it's if you do a major remodel, which was a lot of remodeling done in Scottsdale, then you had to bring it up to current codes if you did more than 25%.
Makes total. Kevin, don't tell anybody your address. Any way to even estimate or gauge how many lives you think that might have saved?
Well, the reason that I got so much notification about this whole sprinkler stuff is I wrote reports. I was traveling around and talking to different fire departments and watching different fire departments and fire chiefs just get beat up at council meetings and by the building industry. And so I knew what we had done in Scottsdale, so I did the first was a 10-year study of actually documenting what occurred. And I compared that to the initial testing that we did with the National Fire Protection Association in 1982. And in that 10 years, they actually worked better than the test showed. And so the first 10 years we did that, and then I did a 15-year update. And in that first 15 years, we had 13 definitive saves of people in sprinkler buildings, both in multifamily, commercial, and residential. Mm-hmm. And some of them were dramatic. One was, we had a gentleman who was sleeping and his roommate poured gasoline on him and lit him on fire.
Oh.
That's a fatal fire in any other jurisdiction in the country. But one sprinkler head in Scottsdale put him out. He didn't even spend the night in the hospital.
No kidding.
He went and was treated and released.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Somebody tried to murder him, and he lived because of a sprinkler?
Yep. And so we had we put all that together in the report, and I was able to show these actual incidents. So when they said, well, sprinklers won't put out fires with flammable liquids. Well, here's somebody that put 5 gallons of gasoline in their house and tried to light it on fire, forgot that their house was sprinklered. We set off 10 sprinkler heads, and the house was saved, and the person's still alive.
That's amazing.
So they worked better than we even designed or thought.
Wow.
Just one highlight, Jim, in a career that's been amazing. One other cool note before we start getting into your background, you're also going to be inducted into the Scottsdale History Hall of Fame this May. That's awesome.
I'm very surprised and very shocked. The people in Scottsdale have been wonderful to me. That's why I said I was so blessed earlier. The amazing people I got to work with, the amazing job I had as being a firefighter and helping the community. And I'm still shocked that they would have somebody like me in that group. But I'm just honored. Honored.
Well, you may be shocked, but Kevin and I certainly aren't shocked to hear that news. Yeah, for sure. And nobody else for that matter.
Very thrilled for you. It's great. Well deserved.
Let's back up a little bit. You're fighting fire since you were 19. What led you to get into that career in the first place?
Well, that's another quick little story. I got out of high school at 17, and so I went to the community college, and for some reason, one of the first things I took was not a paramedic class, but a advanced EMS class. And I lived in Cave Creek at the time, and so Rural Metro was up there and providing service, and I graduated, did very well. It was actually called crash injury management at the time.
Really?
To handle vehicle accidents and all that. And they called and said, would you like to be a reserve? And I first said, no, I don't feel like being a firefighter. I'm not interested in doing that.
Really?
Yep. And then they called me back and said, we have to send somebody to a paramedics class. And would you like to come be on our rescue downtown, our quick response rescue for medical calls? For 3 or 4 months, and then, he'll come back and we'll put him back on the truck. And I went, well, that would be a good idea to do that for 3 or 4 months. So I came down and out of the station that was at Thomas and Miller, the main station down there. Some days we ran 20 calls a day. That was a very, very busy, still is a busy station downtown. And so I did that for 3 or 4 months. And at the end of that time, the chief at the time, Chief Weissman, and the battalion chief said, why don't you want to be a firefighter? And I said, well, I think I would. And they said, well, here's the entrance test. Here's the physical test. Can you pass it? And I did, and became full-time at 19.
That's amazing.
And they called you. They called you.
Because I had taken that class, And,
wow, that's great.
So
some things are meant to be.
I like I said, just very lucky. I feel myself very lucky with this. Just everything kind of fell in place. And like even with the Hall of Fame stuff, everybody gives me a lot of credit for stuff. And I just believe that a lot of times I was just in the right place at the right time. Karma, I believe in karma and stuff. And for all of these things, I was just at the right place at the right time. I was a engine company captain when they started doing the testing on the fire sprinklers. I wasn't in fire prevention. I was at the first fires when we did the test. I was the captain. The Chief Weissman walked up and said, if these things don't work, you better put it out because I have to buy those houses.
Really?
It's incentive, isn't it?
Yeah. So, well, okay, I'll do that for you, Chief. Wow. So I was an operational guy for a lot of years before I got into fire prevention. It was kind of just happenstance.
Well, you say karma, but, it was meant to be. 47 years later, here you are. That's really amazing. So when you started back in the day, Scottsdale had like 3 fire stations, I think, and who knows what the population was. It wasn't anywhere near what it is today. But what's changed in terms of firefighting? And when you look back at all those years and you think about your profession and the business of firefighting, What comes to mind as some of the bigger changes that you think about?
Well, there's a lot that changes in the fire service, and it kind of comes in waves. First was EMS, medical services, when we first went to the paramedics, based on Rescue 51 and all that stuff. But the fire stations in Scottsdale were Miller and Thomas, at Scottsdale Road and McDonald, and at the airport. Those were the 3 fire stations that we had, and that was it. And now Scottsdale's getting ready to design their 16th fire station.
Right.
We'll end up with 16, yeah.
Wow.
And at the time, everybody goes, well, why'd you put them so close to the borders? Well, at the time, Hayden Road didn't even go through.
Yeah.
It stopped in McCormick Ranch. So you either went up Scottsdale Road or you went up Pima Road.
That's right.
And Pima was sometimes open, sometimes closed.
Yeah.
At the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so the stuff that's changed in the fire service, we didn't all have self-contained breathing apparatus at the time. We didn't have air packs. We just had the hoods that we put over and kind of breathe through the hoods on a lot of fires. And it's one of the reasons that cancer is such a big deal in the fire service. And so, we got a couple of those, but then now everybody has their own air pack. Everybody has their own radio. The turnout gear is much, much better. Hazardous materials was another wave that came along. And now wildland firefighting. Now we're back to medical stuff again, realizing that up to 85% of our calls are medical calls. So we're back to 2 medics on an engine company and stuff like that. So it kind of comes in waves. So it's changed dramatically since I started. We would never get away with doing the stuff we did back then.
It's amazing, the equipment. Kevin and I, as you know, have both been in Scottsdale leadership. We always have that fire day where we put all the equipment on and get a chance to feel what it's like. Talk about an amazing experience. And I can just imagine doing that when there's so much equipment. It's amazing to see what you go through.
Well, the public education is much better nowadays as we reach out doing, like the Scottsdale leadership classes and talking to the kids in high school. I always enjoyed talking to the kids in high school, and especially was can ladies be firefighters? Well, absolutely. Their biggest challenge is their upper body strength.
Right.
But they can do it, but they have to work at it. And I would talk to the kids, and they'd say, well, so what's so hard about this? And then you put everything on them, and they get a little bit different view.
Yeah.
And then you say, you need to think of firefighting as a urban athlete. So you watch the football games, you watch the Super Bowl, you watch all that. How long are those guys out there warming up? For a couple hours ahead of time, right?
That's right.
So if you're a firefighter and you go to bed and you go to sleep, and at 1:30 in the morning the alarm goes off, you've got 1 minute to 2 minutes to wake up, understand what they're saying, get dressed, get in the truck. Then you got 3 or 4 minutes to respond to your call, and then you're expected to perform at 100%.
Boom. Yeah.
So there you go. You're going in to do rescues. You're doing whatever else. You're going to car accidents, whatever the case may be. But you have to perform, and that's what the community expects.
Right.
And that's what we expect as firefighters. We expect to be able to perform like that. But we don't get to a half hour or an hour to warm up. And then everybody says, well, geez, why do you have back injuries, or why do you have leg injuries, knee injuries?
Get your pregame meal. And
Yeah. Not usually.
Doesn't quite work that way, does it? Yeah.
We've left a lot of pregame meals on the stove.
Or on the floor after you're done fighting the fire, right? Yeah, exactly. What about the science of firefighting? Talk about how that's evolved over the last couple of decades.
Well, the tactics have gotten much better, and we try to make it as safe as we can. Firefighting is still pretty dangerous. On average, with the exception of 9/11 and stuff like that, but on average, nationally, we kill almost 100 firefighters a year.
Really?
Wow.
And so for a lot of different reasons. Some of it is car accidents. Some of it is heart attacks was a big deal for us. Cancer now is a big deal. So the safety of the fire service and how we're protecting our folks and trying to protect our folks is a big focus. And that's gotten much, much better over the years. It wasn't so much back in the day. It was just, it comes with the territory and you're expected to do it. But we need to take care of our folks. We need to make sure that if they do a 25 or 30-year career, that, we don't lose them 2 years later.
Right.
They should be able to do their career. They should be able to retire. They should be able to go on and have a good life after that. So that's the biggest focus right now, and has been for a while, and as well it should be. Mm-hmm. Even with our fire station designs, our alerting systems are much better than they used to be back then. The ear folks, the headsets. We wear headsets now, which we didn't back then. We just wore the helmet with the flaps, and so we're not sending guys out that are retiring and deaf. Can't have.
So does everybody have a headset now in a fire team?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah, while they're responding.
And can communicate with each other then?
And they can communicate, yeah.
Right.
And so that's the other part that's gotten much, much better is the command system. we are tracking our folks, and the way we attack fires is much more efficient and much, much better than it ever has been. You have to have the incident command. You can't have everybody freelance on a fire.
Right.
You have to know if somebody says, hey, I'm in trouble, you should know where that crew is and how to get to them as fast as you can. So you can't lose people. You have to have that command system in place. And so the communications is huge. All of that stuff is light years ahead of where it was when I started.
You know what I like about Jim is, he's talked about how he told us before, we're going to talk about it here in a second, about what he's doing with Cave Creek right now, but he could consider himself a consultant, really, right?
Sure.
I mean, he could say I'm a fire, but he is a firefighter.
Yeah.
Aren't you? You consider yourself a firefighter still, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. So he's
Gotta be in the blood.
Yeah, he's a real firefighter. I mean, not like he's not, but you know what I mean? I mean, I think it's great. He still considers himself a firefighter, even though he probably hasn't, he retired a few years ago, but.
You don't want me on the fires anymore. You want the young, strong, fast guys and gals. You don't need me on the fires anymore.
That's a good point. There's a physical element to this job. You talked about, just having upper body strength and all that, but there's a real physical element to what you got to do. You got to be in shape.
Absolutely, and they stay in shape. We used to get a lot of questions about why are the fire guys working out? Well, you want them to be working out. You want them to be able to do what they need to do when they get to your place. Mm-hmm. Or you want them to be able to have the strength and the stamina to tear that car apart. Whatever the case may be.
And it could be anything. As we've heard from Chief Shannon before, he's been on with us, and you guys are the first, no matter what. If it's not what does he have to respond? If it's not a shooting or a murder or whatever, these guys, the fire department's the first ones out, no matter what.
Yep.
So you're there for everything, which is pretty amazing. When you look back at your career, not to get too immersed in the negative details, but what are some of the bigger calls that you went on that you recall in terms of some of the fires that you fought? I mean, anything notable come to mind that we might remember just as being like, oh my gosh, you remember the fire back in 1997 or whatever? Is it one that comes to mind?
Well, there's a couple EMS calls that come to mind, and it was mostly associated with drugs and young girls. And it was you just go to yourself, what a waste. Oh. What a waste that happened. Mm-hmm. As far as fires go, probably some of the bigger ones that we had was the Rio fire, the big fire up at Dynamite, and I think it was 1995. And then 2005, right when we were making the transition, we had the Cave Creek Complex fire just north of Desert Mountain, which started in the city of Scottsdale, and we luckily managed to push it into the Forest Service, and then it became the third largest fire in Arizona history at the time.
Oh, jeez.
so it killed us that it burned out of Scottsdale. Not really.
Yeah. Well, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
No kidding. So I remember that fire. So you guys pushed that into national.
Not on purpose.
I know, right? I know, but still.
It's yours. Take it.
No, not for that reason. But you were probably protecting the Scottsdale residents, right?
Yeah, the homes. It was a lightning strike in the middle of the night. And we'd set crews. We thought we had it, but in the morning the winds came up, everything came up, and there was typically it's southwest to northeast blowing the winds, and that's what happened. The winds came and pushed it right up into the forest and went to Seven Springs and on up almost to Strawberry and Pine. Almost.
That all the way up there. Wow.
And west, and the commanders came from the National Forest Service, and I was looking at the maps with them, and they go, "We can go to Bartlett Lake, and it can go to Horseshoe, and it can go to Pine and Strawberry, and on the west side it can go to the freeway, the I-17. I'm going, come on,
that's
guys.
just crazy.
And it almost did.
Did it really?
Yep.
Well, the other thing is, even if you push the fire out, they're still going to want you to help them fight it, right?
Oh yeah,
so, you're still there fighting the good job.
We're still helping them.
Yeah.
And then probably the one of the biggest ones that I was on a lot of them was right over here on Goldwater and the Indian School. It was the station, not the station nightclub, the Rocking Horse.
Oh, yeah.
I was working overtime and happened to be the incident commander that day. And as soon as we got in the truck and started responding, I don't know if we played that for you at Scottsdale Leadership or not, but the Rocking Horse manager called, and then less than 3 minutes later, like a minute and a half later, she called back and said she couldn't guarantee everybody was out of the fire of the building. It was a Friday night on a Saturday night, Friday night in Scottsdale.
Right.
And so we responded down going, holy cow, she called back that fast. And if you listen to the two phone calls, first time she did great, gave all the information. Yeah, they're telling me there's a fire next door, blah, blah, blah. And then a minute and a half later, she's screaming, I can't guarantee everybody's out.
Oh, my.
So that turned into a multi-alarm fire. And that was, I don't know why, but that was my last official command fire.
I'm done.
I switched to fire prevention. But we didn't hurt anybody. We didn't kill anybody. We didn't have any firefighters hurt. But I did a comparison of that fire with, I don't know if you remember the one in Rhode Island, the Station nightclub fire that killed 100 people.
Yeah.
Yep.
Our fire was bigger, had more people, had more risk, and still wasn't sprinklered. Neither building was sprinklered or protected. And we did not kill anybody. And our fire went much better, mostly because of the time and the efforts that we had done in Scottsdale with getting in there ahead of time, making sure the exits were open, making sure they knew how to get out.
Because they have multiple ports of exit at the Rocking Horse.
Yep, and they did at the other one, but they blocked them.
Yeah.
And then they had interior fireworks there at the Station nightclub.
Oh, they
Pyrotechnics,
yeah.
right?
Jeez.
So,
Did they go off?
yep, and that's what set the fire off.
Wow.
And so that's, you and that's what I did most of the end of my career, was do those comparison fires. And, I got to thinking about the Station nightclub fire, and I go, I think my Rocking Horse was pretty close. And we were actually, like I said, bigger, had more people and everything. And we did not have the same outcome that they had back in Rhode Island.
Man, I'll tell you what, that's not lucky at all, but it's also good. Actually, Chief Shannon has talked a lot about the importance of prevention, whether it's out in the preserve or just through the city. The focus on prevention really does save a lot of lives, doesn't it?
It makes a big difference. It's hard to quantify. Why should I give you more inspectors? I need more guys on the trucks, and that's difficult. But when you look at the numbers, which is some of the stuff I did over the end of my career, is our fire loss in Scottsdale is much, much lower than cities our size. Our fatality rate is in half of what cities our size are average for the country. Part of that's because of our construction, but a lot of that is because of the fire prevention, like the nightclubs and restaurants we have and all that. The inspectors are out there all the time. In Scottsdale, one of the things that's different on fire prevention is you can't get your final certificate of occupancy until the fire department inspector has signed off on the building. In a lot of jurisdictions, the building official will give it, and then it might be 2 years or 3 years before the fire inspector actually gets to that building.
No kidding. Jeez.
And then they say, oh, well, you got to fix this. Well, the business
2
owner
years
is not
later.
real happy.
Yeah, right.
But we know that at the time that building opened, everything was done and all the safety items were in place and working. And I think that's made a huge difference in Scottsdale.
No kidding. One more question before we get, Kevin, we start talking about what's happening in Cave Creek right now. I'm just curious, what was going through your head when you watched the fire in Lahaina and Maui? And you watched that whole thing unfold.
great question,
Brush
Don.
fire, winds, who knew? I mean, my gosh, what goes through your head when you think about that?
First, I always think of the impact on the people, and then I try to think of how the firefighters are responding to that and what they're doing. And in my mind, with my recent background and stuff, I was thinking they couldn't have taken any preventive steps. They couldn't have done anything to, address the fuel loads or, have the overgrown stuff or things like that. There couldn't have been, and they didn't. That's one of their problems. Now, the final report's not out, so I'm not going to talk too much about it, and I hate talking about what other fire departments did or didn't do. They had to make those decisions right at that time.
Right.
And that's very difficult to do. But they should, or they, like what we're trying to do and what Chief Shannon was talking about, we're trying to get ahead of this. We're trying to be a little bit preventive. We're trying to do defensible space around homes and defensible space around buildings and access to the fires. How are we going to handle it if we get a big fire? We're going to practice and do tabletops and stuff like that. I don't think that they were ready for that. I don't know that Hawaii has had that many big wildland fires,
Right.
but they had hurricane winds, and that stuff's going to happen, unfortunately.
Boy, that was just amazing. That was a piece on, I think, 60 Minutes. They talked about a couple of firefighters that were right in the middle of it. They were stuck. They were stuck in their truck. Remember, they talked about they were stuck in their truck.
And the guy got out of the car and found a Jeep. And broke through a wall.
Yep.
And went back and got him. Did you see that? That was
I did.
crazy.
And when they went back, the truck had melted.
Yeah.
It was gone. And so there would have been no protection, no saving those guys anywhere if that guy hadn't done that.
He was a hero.
Yeah, amazing.
Well, that's what we try to do. We try to hire people and hire firefighters that can think. We say, okay, we're going to practice for this type of residential fire, where every residential fire is different, or this type of commercial fire, and that's different, and every type of wildland fire. Yeah, there's some similarities, and there's some different things that you want to do and some things you want to obtain and get to some goals, but everyone's different.
Yeah. You got to be ready for all of it, huh?
Yeah.
Kevin, you were talking about some things that Jim's still doing, man. What's
So I
going
mean,
on with that?
he flew all over the country and was talking about the sprinkler ordinance, but what's our neighboring communities come plucked you up for something?
Yeah, in 2020, I don't know if you remember or not, Cave Creek had two big wildland fires. They were about 10 days apart. And the first one, they were about 5,000 acres each, and it really drained. What happened was they called for assistance. It was the fire department out there was Rural Metro at the time, and they called for assistance, and the valley sent a whole bunch of resources. They did what they could for those fires. The state came in and brought in the air tankers and all that stuff. The second fire happened again, and the same resources came in. And after that, the valley communities, valley cities let Cave Creek know. They said, well, you're not part of the system.
Right.
Your training's different. Things are different. Unless you change and become part of the system, then we're going to not send those types of resources, because basically everything north of the CAP Canal came to Cave Creek on those two occasions. And so the town at the time... leaving those communities vulnerable, right? Well, sure. When you take that much resources, they had to backfill it as best they could and all that. But that's what they were saying. We can't not cover our folks that are paying for this, right, and supporting us by sending it off to somebody that doesn't support the system. And the system you're talking about, Chief Shannon talked a lot about it when he was here. But just remind our audience who may be listening now who didn't listen to Chief Shannon's show yet, you're part of a larger community where you guys is basically one fire department that serves the whole valley, even though, right? Yes. It's called the automatic aid system, the valley's automatic aid system. And basically, if you're part of the system, the training is the same. The dispatch is either from Phoenix or Mesa. So you have centralized dispatch. The communications are the same. And the resources, it's the second largest single units or single entity, with the exception of the Fire Department of New York, in the country. Because a captain from Scottsdale can run a fire in Phoenix, and a Phoenix captain can run a fire in Glendale, or Tempe captain can run a fire in Scottsdale, or Mesa. Everybody is cross-trained. And so each community has their own resources. You're supposed to take care of the normal stuff, but if something big happens, then we have the resources that can come. So it's called the automatic aid system, and it just backs everybody up. And Cave Creek was not part of that system because they were outsourcing their fire protection to Rural Metro. Because it was actually individual contracts from Rural Metro with individual homeowners and individual businesses. Oh, wow. So only about 45% of the people at the time were even contracting with them. Really? Yeah. So it was kind of an antiquated system. But so the Valley sent a letter to Cave Creek and said, you either get on board or we're not going to send those resources anymore because we're impacting our own communities. And so Cave Creek got with Chief Shannon and Chief of Phoenix and Chief of Daisy Mountain and said, what can we do? And they got together and somehow decided that it was a good idea for me to go out there.
What are you going to do? Who are you going to call? Because you call Jim, right? Jim Ford all the time. Who are you going to call?
Well, I had grown up in Cave Creek, so I did understand some of the local politics and things. Yeah. I didn't know anybody on the council at the time, but I did understand Cave Creek local politics a little bit. And so I talked with Chief Shannon, and basically Cave Creek did an intergovernmental agreement with Scottsdale for me to go out there and evaluate and tell them what they needed to do to put together their own fire service.
Yeah, that's what you're doing right now, right?
And so that's what I did. And then after a year of doing that and telling them how much it's going to cost for all the stuff that they did not have. If you remember, Cave Creek didn't own anything. They didn't have a truck. They didn't have a station. They didn't have a piece of hose. They didn't own anything. And so I put together the entire thing and what it would cost. And then we had different options. They could pay for it all themselves to do a one-station fire department, or we could be a fire department and contract out, which is what we did. We did an intergovernmental agreement with Daisy Mountain Fire Department, who was part of the automatic aid system.
Okay.
And so we pay for the dispatch. We bought the truck. We bought a station. We're remodeling the station now. And so Daisy Mountain manages the day-to-day training and the certifications that the firefighters and medics need to have. And we pay them to do that. And so it's worked out very well.
So they have their own firefighters now, Cave Creek?
Well, they're Daisy Mountain firefighters. Daisy Mountain. Okay. Yeah. We pay Daisy Mountain for 15 firefighters.
Okay.
And then which includes captains and engineers and medics and stuff. And then they staff the station and take care of all the training, and we pay an overhead for them to do that. And it's up to us to buy and remodel the station and buy the fire truck and all that the other things like that.
Kevin, we got to find another project for Jim to do.
I know, right?
Figure out who's going to call him next,
I know, exactly.
So I feel kind of honored today because Jim's a former Hodges Alumni Achievement Award winner from Scottsdale Leadership. And in a couple of days, Kevin's going to be adding his name to that list. So I'm in awe, man. I bow down to both the Hodge winners, man.
Jim, tell them the story about when I called you on the phone. That's a good one.
So the way that it works with Scottsdale Leadership is the past winners of Hodges and Drinkwaters gets to go to the nominations and look at them and vote on them. And so I've done that now a few years. And so we go in and we go through the process, and it's very, contained, very secretive. You're not allowed to say anything until notices are put out. So we go through the whole process. And Kevin obviously was the winner, and we know the winner when we leave, but we're not allowed, sworn to secrecy.
Right.
So I go home, and so later on that day, Kevin calls me.
I haven't called him. I've never called him before in my life.
Not related to this.
I didn't think I had his phone number.
Totally unrelated subject.
Totally unrelated. And like I said, he never called me for anything else.
You said karma before. I think we're onto something, right?
And I'm going, why is Kevin calling me? Just somebody. I'm not going to be the one to leak this. So afterwards I asked him, I said, why did you call me? Well, for this, obviously.
Yeah, I called because I was calling him to congratulate him on the history Hall of Fame. So
my goodness.
That had been announced.
That's funny.
And so I was calling him to congratulate him, and he didn't didn't let on at all.
Good for you, Jim. That's true to the cause, man.
Yep.
Yeah, that was a good story.
Fantastic. We could go on forever, but we're kind of near the end of our show now. But Jim, just a big thanks to you for all your public service, 47 years of public service, and still ongoing now with what you're doing in Cave Creek. So we sure appreciate everything that you're doing, and it's been an honor to have you on the show today.
Well, I just thank you for having me here. And I could start out the discussion. I'm honored and blessed with what I got, the people I've got to work with, the people I got to work for, here in the community, the stuff I've got to do. I just, can't imagine anything else I'd have rather done or would have done. And I get way too much recognition for the stuff I did because I love it. What they say, you never work a day in your life if you do what you like, and you can't think of anything else than being better than being a firefighter. So.
How true that is, but a humble heart, Kevin, would you say?
I just love this man.
Fantastic, man. Jim, thank you so much for everything you've done and everything you're going to do right now and things I know that you're going to continue to do for our community. We sure appreciate it. And thanks to all of you for listening today. We'll be back again next week with another episode of Today and Tomorrow in Scottsdale.